Glad you're here. I'll dedicate it to you.
All right,
Anybody else?
All right, guys, it is my pleasure to introduce Jim Eastham. Jim is, let's see, former mayor, former chairman of the Chamber Board of Directors, former Rotary president. Jim wears and has worn many hats. If you've enjoyed the Eastham Park, then you've enjoyed property that Jim and his family donated to the town, and I'm sure I'm missing a myriad of things, but among all of those other things, he's also somewhat of a local historian. So he's going to give us a...
Just because I've lived long enough that I know more than a lot of people in the room, so they don't know.
So Jim is going to give us a history presentation today. Thank you, Jim. Yeah.
Please. The way, just to give you a little background, the way this talk started, I was in the program with the second. And they did a walking tour of Main Street. I guess it was Patrick?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it got dark, people got scared, because Patrick would talk so much that
No one, right? Yeah.
No.
Ferris.
From the old Heritage Society. But anyway, what they found was with 12 to 15 people walking up and down Main Street, the first 3 or 4 kind of around Patrick could hear what he was saying, and everybody else was just kind of getting little bits and pieces. So I noticed that, and I also noticed that some of the things that he was talking about were not quite accurate, or he didn't have enough background information. And as a hobby over the years, I had been collecting old photographs or pictures of old photographs of buildings in Front Royal. So I thought, well, I talked to Nikki and I said, what we could do is instead of taking the people to the town, we'll bring Main Street to the people and have everybody sit in the same room, and I can show before and afters of these buildings, so you can kind of get an idea of not only where we are, but where we started and how we evolved to get to where we are today. So that's what's brought us to this point today. And because Main Street is an evolving, amorphous organism, a lot of these buildings change use. And so a lot of these pictures are outdated. So what I'm going to do, this will be the last run through of this one. I'm updating photographs, and then Jennifer and Dwayne will be photographing a current one, which will be the last current one, I guess. So anyway, we'll just get started here. And thank you to the Chamber and I guess the EDA. I mean, this started off years ago with a white wrinkled sheet hanging in a room that you could barely see what was on the screen. So we have evolved over time. Now the town of Front Royal started off as a real estate speculation venture. And it was incorporated in 1788, and it was 50 acres. And what they did is some speculators. Remember, Front Royal was the frontier back in 1788, and they were building on the bypass. They were building Conestoga wagons and wagon wheels and that sort of thing for people to stage their wagon trains to go west. And so having labor was an issue, and having a place for labor to live was a bigger issue that we still have today with workforce labor. Having affordable housing for the police and, our issues now with police and school teachers and firemen, that sort of people. Back then, it was workers. And so what they wanted, and like if you go to Winchester and you look, they have so many more brick houses. Well, that use of those buildings was different. here they made them out of wood because it was cheaper and they could charge less for people to rent space to live in. So when you go up Chester Street, your oldest home is wood. So this is a lithograph of basically what they called the square, the town square, which and some called it the Y, but this is where Chester Street, which is coming this way, and Main Street, which is coming this way, where they intersect. So this is the heart of town. And this is a photograph taken in 1912 of that same area, but now we're standing, there's no point, right here. This is where Element is. The gazebo
We're looking the opposite way.
is right here. So we're looking west on Main Street. Chester Street is going down this way, and this is like the pawn shop right here. But a couple things you might find interesting is, photography is not like it is today where everybody carries your camera with you. Actually, photography was a profession. It was like being a doctor or something, because it evolved chemicals and professionalism to get things done. And very few people had their photographs taken. For one reason, you had to stand still for a long time.
That's why they were frowning all the time?
That's it. No, seriously.
That makes sense, you know?
Seriously. Everybody had to and if you look, Abraham Lincoln had a mild case, I think, of Parkinson's. And if you look at some of his photographs, you can see where he had some tremors. And his boot would be a little fuzzy at the end from it moving while they were taking the picture, because the aperture had to be wide open and open for a period of time for enough light to come in to expose the silver oxide or whatever that stuff is on the film. So, but anyway, here's a barber pole. They had a barber shop. This was the Fishback Hotel that later became the Strickler House, and this is where Belle Boyd's aunt and uncle were the proprietors of this hotel, which is right across the street from the train station. It's a great location. Main Street was dirt, and so they had cobblestone across here where you could walk and not get your shoes muddy when it rained. And this was the street light. You can see it hanging up here. We did have electricity. And this was when this was hand colored. They didn't have color film, so they would just take a black and white and color it. And this was they were very big on having parades back then, because back then you could live out in Bentonville and never come into town. You had no reason to. Schools, the elementary schools were all out where the kids were, and those who were fortunate enough to go to high school, they would come into town. But everybody else, you quit after elementary school and you were on the family farm or working at one of these factories down here. So they would have homecoming parades. This was 1912, where they had a homecoming week from July 1 to 6. And you can see here where they refer to it as the square. And this was the businessmen's parade. I always thought this was kind of interesting. The flag had 48 stars. We hadn't gotten to Hawaii and Alaska yet. This was portable. This was the judge's stand. And this was Mrs. Cloud's front porch before they tore her house down. They took the porch off. And they removed this from the barn lot out back here where they...
Who was Mrs. Cloud?
Who
was Mrs. Cloud?
Just a lady who lived on Main Street.
Oh, okay. So she wasn't anybody famous or anything?
Well, except for having a street named after her.
I was just going to say, that's why I asked who she was.
Yeah. But they kept her porch, And where the First Citizens Bank is, that's where the house was. They tore the house down in prosperous times to expand the bank, and I'll show you how that worked. And so this is a photograph of kind of today. You can see Element wasn't open yet. There's still windows papered up. So this is the kind of thing I just need to update to give people better points of reference. And here's a photograph of the Strickler house. And here again, Element is all down here. And this is right around the corner on, let me back up here a second, I'll show you. That building is right around the corner, just past this building on the left. There were 3 buildings the Comptons owned, and they eventually put them all together. But I like this photograph because it was the day of the horse and carriage, gradually coming into the day of the horseless buggy. And you can't read this, but the sign here says, "The man who drinks, first, last hired, first laid off." So temperance was big back then. And then this is around late 30s, early 40s. And here's First Citizens. This is where the Blue Ridge Arts Council, have y'all been there yet?
Last stop today.
That's, so this is where Blue Ridge Arts Council is. This was the sanitary, and the sanitary was a grocery store. Now remember, everything was on Main Street. Main Street was your shopping center. And we didn't have Kmart's or Rural Kings or any of that. So you'd come get your groceries here, and there are a couple more groceries up the street. And this is what we see today. Now, where is this? Well, this is Main Street as well. The gazebo would be right about here. We had a big fire in 1969, and it wiped all of this out. This is looking east on Main Street. Here again, the Strickler house, or where Element is right here. And here's the Main Street Mill, and the train station sits tucked back here, and everything else except this building burned down in this huge fire. And like I said, Main Street was the shopping center. And when I was growing up, they'd have what they called sidewalk days. And they'd go in the back and get all the old stuff, all old inventory, and bring it out. They'd close down Main Street and put the racks out and sell stuff for pennies on the dollar to get rid of their inventory. So you could buy an overcoat or a dress for $5 back then.
What was the year?
This was probably in the mid-60s. But, I mean, you can look at the variety of independent businessmen. There weren't franchises like back then, except for Jewel Box was a franchise, A&N, that's Army and Navy, that was a franchise.
Did you have a Woolworths or a...
Yeah, up on this...
Or Ben Franklin?
Up on this end. Joe the Motor's Friend, you ever heard of that?
Mm-mm.
So this was the First National Bank. This was on Main Street. Maybe I could give you 100 guesses and you might get it because there's probably about 100 buildings on Main Street. But the thing I like about this slide was there's a guy who had an insurance company and rented space from the bank. And so his office was over the bank here, and his particular office was over the vault. And he had a sign on his desk that said, "My assets over $3 million." So anyway, that's what it is today. Felicia might recognize that.
One of my windows
Your
there.
asset
Yes.
is not set there. You might set aside $3 million. But back in the 70s, F&M Bank bought this building and a couple others. Well, the one was the Citizens Bank, but a different Citizens Bank, and then it was Front Royal Bank. Banks changed names a lot, you may have noticed over the times. But anyway, they did this big modernization program on Main Street in an attempt to compete with the shopping centers, with the Royal Plaza shopping centers, and you know, trying to keep people down on Main Street rather than buck the trend, which was all these stores going out to, you know, we became an automobile society that you had to get in your car to go shop to get anything. And so everybody was going to the shopping centers. They were trying to modernize Main Street to make it more appealing. So anybody have an idea where this is? This is Sona Bank. This is on the corner of, this is Royal Avenue, and this is Main Street, going this way. And this was, of course, Forsyth, the hardware store. In hardware, they had everything. It was just everything, including, this was a gas station. Now, this is their gas pump. And what they would do is they had gas tanks in the ground, and they would put the gas, fill the tank, and then there's a pump handle on this, and they would pump till the gas pumped up into this globe. I think that was maybe 2 gallons, something like that. And then they had a hose here, so you would drive your car up, you pay for your gas, you pump your gas up into this, and then you would, by gravity, empty it into your gas tank of your Model T. And now this is down another gas station, and I think this was the Ford place. This was down on the other end, and this is where Katie Toole's building is, the black building across from
Main Street Mill.
yeah, Mill. And so here again, here's your gas tank. They did a modern, see, now I have another slide of that building as well that I have to update. So now we're back up with the Methodist Church, and this was dedicated, I think, in 1903. The former Methodists, well, I'll have to go back to that in a minute. This building was Dr. Miller's family. He was the Millers were a prominent family in Front Royal, and he was a dentist. They tore this building down to put up a parking lot, which is now the Methodist Church parking lot on that end of the street. And this is a float for the one of the parades. This is the Front Royal Junior League. I don't know how many are familiar with the Junior League. It was kind of like a women's Rotary Club kind of thing. And so they had a float. There's a Model T under here somewhere. And then RMA, which was founded here in, it was 1890. The cadets were big on marching through town. It was a big deal. And they used to, on Sundays, they'd all go to church, but they wouldn't go to church at RMA. They would go to the local churches, and that was a connection that was built between the church, between the school and the various churches. And so they would march through town, and cadets would fall out of rank when they got to their church. And then when church was over, they'd start back up. And here's the afternoon. We'll be getting to that. Here's the bank that we talked about, sitting right here. This is the old courthouse. What was it? 1836. Yeah, 1836. Warren County split off from Frederick County. And so they had to have a courthouse. And this is the old courthouse, and this statue is still there. This is a Confederate memorial statue. So this will give you a sense of where this building was. So it was quite a big deal when they built this. And this was built in the 1930s. And this building is actually still around, the Central Fire Station. Believe it or not, this is the hose truck right here. And when you're walking up Royal Avenue near the courthouse, if you remember this window right here, because that's where it is today.
Oh.
Of course, it's not beauty school anymore. What is it? Is this the hookah
Martial
bar
arts.
or whatever it is?
Martial arts or?
Vapor.
No, Vapor's down the street, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's a vapor place here.
That's the Pampered Pooch place now.
Yeah,
Pampered
martial arts is the building right beside it.
Yeah.
He owns both of those buildings, and he'll be having that one and bringing it back. We were looking for some more photographs recently because he's going to be participating in the facade grant.
Oh, okay.
So that would be a wonderful photograph to get.
I think I have some others. Now, here's Dollar General. It's down on Main Street. And you can see how the sidewalks are torn, and what happened back in the 1980s, mid-1980s, Main Street just looked like crap. I mean, it was horrible. There were 29 vacant storefronts on Main Street between Royal Avenue and the bypass. And, you know, growing up here, people come visit, you would avoid taking them to Main Street. You would give a wide swath. When you were showing the town, you'd show them more country than you would downtown, because this is what it looked like. And the town council, finally, we had a visionary town council that came in, and within a public-private partnership, the town applied for a grant, a facade-type grant, a redevelopment grant for Main Street, and didn't get it. And so rather than say, oh, that's Front Royal, that's our usual luck, you know, they said, well, why didn't we get it? Where did we fall short? And the grant people said, well, you needed to do this and that. And they said, okay, well, that's what we'll do. And so they reapplied for the grant the next year. But in the meantime, the town said, you know what? If this is our Main Street, this is the heart of our town, we need to go ahead and move ahead. We can't continue to just put things off. So the town started tearing up the streets, and they said, well, if we're going to do this, it's going to cost more than $1 million that a grant has. And let's do it right. Let's put the utilities underground. Let's not have the let me see if I can give an example here. Yeah, I'll show you later on. But you had huge, tall telephone poles that were totally out of scale for Main Street. But you could put a telephone wire and a street light on it, so that's what they did. Everything was done on the cheap until this point. They said, we're going to start doing things right. And so this today. This was the Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. Many of you knew it as A&P. And this was a grocery store also on Main Street. And this is back around 1936. And this actually water has flooded from Happy Creek all the way down to Stokes at the bridge. It backed up. And I tell people there's a reason they call Water Street down at the other end. And a lot of it they attribute to the water runoff when they put the remount up where the conservation is. That used to be mules and horses, thousands of them. And they ate the ground bare, and there wasn't anything to keep the water from running off into Happy Creek and into town. And so now they've taken measures that doesn't happen anymore. But anyway, this was a grocery where you could buy peas and corn, 4 cans for 25 cents.
Did that turn into the larger AMPs that we saw in the 70s and 80s
Yeah.
and 90s?
Yeah. And this is right across from the movie theater, from the Park Theater. This is what it
Kid Lane.
kind of looks like today. See, here again, need update. And the Capitol Restaurant, that's where the courthouse crowd used to gather. The lawyers would go there and get their coffee and toast and solve all the world's problems, and it was a big gossip place right there. And then you were asking about, who was it? Woolworth. Well, we had Montgomery Ward's was up here,
Okay.
and Sears was up here too.
Wow.
It was all on Main Street. And so those buildings were bought by F&M and torn down and or renovated and replaced by BB&T in this space, which now the town occupies. Now this says present post office. This was present post office in 1926. And the post office was down here. There's a roller rink upstairs. You go roller skating. And then you go back behind it and there's a vaudeville theater. So this is kind of today. Here again needs updating. This was the vaudeville theater, Murphy Theater, right here, which later became a movie theater. But this is, they had what they called a flyover, where sets were raised by pulleys for plays, so that you didn't have to put them aside, you just lower them. And they were all organized for the play, and they just take one down and put the other one up. This little section here was the original building that the post office was added onto. This was the Methodist Church. You wonder why Church Street is called Church Street. Well, there's this church, you go down 50 feet and there's another church, and you go down, there's another church, and you go down, there's another church. So anyway, they replaced this church, and this was the church they replaced. And like I said, they just added on to the front and to the sidewalk on Main Street, and then added the theater on the back. And something that I found interesting, I like architecture, so I'm always kind of snooping around stuff. This was the original design of the windows of the Methodist Church. So the original Methodist Church was around the corner on Chester Street right here. And they had the same windows, so when they built the new church on Church Street, they copied the architectural design of these windows on the new church on Church Street. And this is Trout Drug. This is on the corner, the other corner of Church Street and Main Street. And this is like back in It's a Wonderful Life, where all the drugstores had soda fountains. And so they had a soda fountain. And believe it or not, when I was growing up, the kids would go from the high school, walk down to Trout's and get a float or a sundae or whatever at the soda fountain. And if you go into Wynn's restaurant, as you walk into the right, there's the back of the modernized soda fountain that was in Trout's that replaced this one. So there's still a piece of the soda fountain in Wynn's restaurant next time you go in there. Now, we were talking about the photographer, Carroll. It's the guy's name, A.N. Carroll, and he was a town photographer. And you can see his sign right here. Well, his studio is right here. And I have another thing that shows here's the balcony, that those photographs that I just showed you, looking up Main Street, this is where he took them from this balcony here. And here's your Church Street sign. This was not the post office anymore. Now this says pictures on the overhang here. Of course, there's the Skillet Restaurant across the way. This is where Rotary first started meeting. And even back then, you had AAA. And just up the street, there was a garage and another gas station. And this is Carol's natural light that he used for his photography studio. This is on the alley there, the Church Street alley. And then the Weaver Building. This was designed by an architect from Washington, D.C. named John Sloan. And he used to come out and play poker with some of the dignitaries of Front Royal, the highfalutin lawyers and judges and all. And apparently he lost and had to design this building and the and the Bank of Warren building. So this is the 50s modernization of the Weavers building. You can see what the fashion was back in the 20s, 1920s, and what it was in the 50s.
Jim,
Yeah.
can I just say, the couple that just purchased the Weaver building, they've actually done their research, and the architect, he's actually done several huge buildings in New York City. But they are going to be renovating the front of that Weaver building and bringing it back to its original glory with the leaded glass and all of that.
Yeah,
They're doing the research now.
if you're walking up Main Street and you're walking east, like going towards Element, if you look on this column on the inside, you can see where Sloan has his name
Yeah.
etched like you would a tombstone.
And they're still trying to figure out, that little building where the newsstand was right there,
Mhm.
they're still trying to get in there and see what's there, so.
Well, when I was growing up, you could buy a pack of Winstons for $1 in magazines.
Isn't it a cab stand?
I think it may have been a cab stand at one time.
Yeah, somebody said it was a newspaper stand and a cab stand.
And there was a lady who ran this, and she was fooling around on her husband, and her husband chased her into Weaver's and shot her.
On the stairs?
Shot her on the stairwell in the Weaver's building, and she didn't make it.
Try to edit that part out.
Yeah. we could have gone all day. So ladies, let that be a lesson to you.
You got stories, you got a title.
Yeah. So Doc Sonner was the local druggist, and this is, God, what's there now? I'd say there's a consignment shop, but that doesn't narrow it down too much on Main Street. But the Citizens Bank is right here. And where this tree is where Blue Ridge Arts Council is. But Doc Sonner was basically owned the Bank of Warren. And if you wanted to get a loan at the Bank of Warren, you would go into this door here, where that was Doc Sonner's office, and you'd say, Doc, I need a loan. And he put a note out and say, here, take this over to Stuart, which was Stuart Payne, who was president of the bank. He said, tell Stuart to write you up a note and give you the money. And that's how you did banking in the good old days. Didn't like that anymore. So here again, this is that 1936 flood in the sanitary, which is now Blue Ridge Arts Council, and the Warren Drug Building. And that's it today. And this is down off of Blue Ridge Avenue. And, floods, there just wasn't anything to stop them, and so they were pretty devastating when they did hit. And this is, it's a computer place now. It was a bicycle place, but now it's a computer place, and that will be updated. This is Maddox Funeral Home on Main Street. And this is middle of Main. all this is. They tore all this down. And this was the old Bank of Warren. And this is it kind of today. Of course, that'll be updated as well. And this is what it evolved into, was a neoclassical temple to money. And this was not 1936. This is, or 1986 when they were redoing Main Street. This was back around the turn of the century. And this is an example of what they tried to do on main streets back in the 70s to try to modernize the buildings. They would say, okay, we're going to put a facade, but we're going to put a modern facade on the first floor. But the bad news is they put this kind of facade using residential material, and hopefully with the facade contest that they're doing, they'll go back to look at the top of the buildings to get their architectural reference rather than trying to modernize it. They'll just try to bring out the historic characteristics of the building. Of course, they had a lot of porches on Main Street. This Southern Mansion was on Main Street, and they tore it down to put up a theater. And I have to update it every week with new movies. And then the afternoon, the point of contention for so many years. And I looked through this. I think I found somebody who moved at all these guys. But this was, I've been in the building within the last couple months, and the inside is just like a cave. It's very dangerous, and I don't see how they can renovate it and have any kind of financial remuneration for their efforts. But they can try. But one thing we did find out is that if you hit this pole here with a Model T, that whole thing will come down. Which is what happened. The guy took the turn too fast. I think he had a heart attack and hit that pole, and the balcony came down. And so this is it over the years. This is back in the 20s, and then they didn't put the balcony back. They did add the glass coffee shop over here on the side. And this is probably the worst that this looked. This was a flophouse for years on Main Street. And back for the town's bicentennial, the Duncan family that owned this building decided they were going to renovate the facade of the outside of this building. Unfortunately, road to hell is paved with good intentions, and what they did was they sandblasted this, the paint off of the brick. Well, when you sandblast brick, you take the finish off of the brick, and you're back to dried clay, which then water can seep into the clay, freeze, thaw, crack the brick, and you can go down and just look at the side of the building and see where that's happening now. But this is as good as it looked for some time. And then this is kind of what it evolved or devolved back into. So when the Barrows guy bought it, at least he boarded up the windows and doors. And now we're back down on the other end of town. This is another modernization attempt that here they used faux stone, permastone with asphalt. And this was a shoe store. So the guys who bought it tore everything off. That says Collins Meat Market. So here again you had another grocery store right across the street from the sanitary. And what they did is they looked up to the top of the building to get an idea of what the rest of the facade should look like. And so they copied up here, down here, and what I thought was interesting is that all these pine boards were actually the pine shelving of the shoe store. So they reused the wood in the store, and this is what it looked like when it was finished. This was the Royal Palace ice cream parlor, and then here's a law office. And then beside it was the Front Royal Mill. And then the good old train station. And this homeless people would crash here. Norfolk and Western sold it to the town for $1, but everything was boarded up and painted battleship gray. And we've talked about the fire. Well, this is where the fire was. You can see it burned that whole block. This was a big furniture store. And this was the one building, the fire station, the train station's here. This is the one building that didn't burn. The town ended up buying it and tearing it down. This building here. And where those other buildings were, that became a gravel parking lot for years and years and years. And so finally, part of the downtown renovation, this building was bought, torn down, and the town, this was not done with grant money, this was done with money from the town. The town council allocated money to do this, hired an architect. There's a 3-person committee who did this. I was one of the 3. So I was intimately involved with this. That's why there's so many pictures of it. The train station, they jacked it up, cut all the rotten boards, put a new foundation under it, scabbed onto the existing walls, and then lowered it onto the new foundation. They had this terracotta roof. They had enough to do one side, but what they found was that there was a spare terracotta tile up at the Conservation Center, which they gave to the town. So all of the terracotta from one side is on this side, and then the stuff from the Conservation Center is on the other side. And if you look at it as a bird, they're 2 different shades of red. But now you know, but most people would never know that.
I haven't tried the bird view in a while.
I haven't tried it, no, but now with drones, the secret will be out. And so this is with the landscaping. And this is just how this gravel parking lot evolved. And one of the things that I thought was kind of neat is that we picked up on this sunrise detail. If you look around town, not just Main Street, you'll see this sunrise as an architectural detail at various buildings around. This is where Wynn's is. It's up here.
Never would have noticed.
There you go.
Learn something every day.
And something I thought was kind of neat was when they put the urgent care building in, the architects picked up on that and incorporated that into their building. So when you're riding people around and showing them around town, you can say, how about this? And so this is when they extended the new improved bridge to connect Main Street with the bypass. And of course, there used to be a house here, and
The bypass is Commerce, right?
Commerce, right, right.
I just have never heard it called bypass.
Yeah, well, if you've been around long
No, I
enough.
haven't been.
Yeah. And of course, there are gas stations. And we discussed that building. And then this is probably the low point for this. This is in 1985. And so their attempt at renovating the building was to put T111 siding and paint it. But it was better than nothing, I guess. And then the Strickler house, which became Frank's. And the Frank sign, you'll notice they put that back up. That was a clothing store back then. That was Mike Silik's dad that had that. And then it became the Second Chance shop. And that will get updated soon. And be Element. And we had a White Castle here. Yeah. Talking about Woolworths, we had a White Castle.
Oh, man.
Oh my God, you guys had a lot of stuff.
I know. It was all on Main Street.
Wow.
And this was a house of one of the more prominent locals that became Maddox Funeral Home. And Aubrey Weaver was a local lawyer. This is where Pond, now I guess it's just Pond. It was Pond Athey, and it's gone through various incantations, but now it's Pond Law Group. And this was the Front Royal High School, and this was where kids went to high school in Warren County before the high school on Luray Avenue was built. And this was located on as you face E. Wilson Morrison School. This is on the west side. So after they built the other high school, they tore this down and then added on to the elementary
So
school.
is Skyline older than Warren
No,
School? Okay, but so people were going to this,
they were going
even
to this.
after Warren?
They went to this school at the turn of the century and left this school to go to the one on Luray Avenue, which was Warren County High School, now middle school.
Oh, okay.
They moved in 1939,
Okay, now I get it. 'cause
and then
I
they
was
tore
gonna say,
this down.
Warren County High School is not on Luray.
Yeah, it's now the middle school.
Okay.
And this is where that building
Got it.
is now, or was. But there's a high school before that, and that's this building. You got any idea where this is?
Yes, I do.
There you go.
Yeah, right across from the courthouse.
Right across from the courthouse. If you look right
Do
here,
they have the sunshine detail too?
No, I was in that building, that's right.
No, I'm kidding.
with all the pigeon poop.
Yeah.
Yeah, also take note of this building here too while you're looking. But if you notice here, this was the school, and there's a combination auditorium gymnasium on the third floor in this building.
Did you see that was where the teacher, the pupils were sitting down in the center, and you could see her footsteps as she walked around the class
Yeah,
up there. Did you see that? You know, through the pigeon poop. That is, you know.
it was raised.
Yeah, it was a raised floor, so she'd walk around the students, they sit down in the middle. It's very neat, other than the stuff they had to clean out of there, but
15 tons worth of pigeon poop or something ridiculous. And then Baptist Church, the Catholic Church. The thing that amazes me is the electricity for the town, how they delivered electricity. And then the Episcopal Church, which goes back to the 1880s. Now, you know where this church is?
is that from Oregon Methodist?
No.
No.
It's a rug shop now. It's here's the building with the columns, and then the school is
Yeah,
just right over
Anthony's
here.
Pizzas.
This is on the corner of
Yeah.
Stonewall and Royal. This was the Presbyterian church, and this church was they built a new one back up the street on Luray Avenue. But what's interesting about this church is that when they used to haul freight up the Shenandoah River, they did it in these boats called bateaux or gondolas, and they were solid wooden, kind of like canoes, but big trees that are hauled out. And it was easier to just float them upriver, empty them, and then use the wood, which is what this is, milled gondolas, and they use this for the walls of the church. And I just happened to be by there when they were putting new, not grout, what is it? new siding on it. So I was able to get a shot, and you can see where they filled in the windows for the various church spires.
Did the level of this might be a little off subject, but did the level of the river, was it ever up higher than it is today? Because now I'm
Not really.
Okay, so they didn't use it, so it wasn't much of a
The dams
commerce
really,
area.
yeah, the dams really didn't
Do
make
much.
The deeper water was down around Riverton, and then there's your kind of what it looks like today. And then this is the building beside it, Skyline Hall, which before they had bed and breakfasts, they had tourist homes, and this was a tourist home. And this was a big deal because it had private baths. That was a big deal. And the thing I like about this one is that Skyline Hall, telephone 50. That's your phone number. What's your phone number? 50. But that's back when you ring up Sarah and say, Sarah, get me 50, will you? And that's what it looks like today.
That's Fred Andrews' office.
Yeah, right across from the courthouse. And then this is where Joe Sackett and Sons car parts place is. This blew up. This was they made ketchup there, and the boiler blew up. And they also, Virginia made jams and jellies years ago. Now we're moving out to, we're just about through here. We had a college here called Eastern College. And I can give you a lot of guesses where this is, and you'd never guess.
Riverton.
Mm-hmm.
Riverton.
No. Now they came up. Here's another shot of it. This was a college at the turn of the last century, and it was a co-ed college, and it lasted till I guess maybe the teens, maybe early 20s. But it later became, this is one of the dormitories. It became a hotel, the Royal Hotel, and stayed a hotel. And this is in Front Royal, until somebody came up with this concept where you could go and buy beer and milk and bread from 7 in the morning till 11 at night. And they came up with the concept of the 7-Eleven. Tore that building down to put up the 7-Eleven.
Wow.
And that's progress.
We'd like to go back in time on that one. When you,
Oh, I know. I actually have been in that building. I was like, but I can remember walking in it, and they had like a big ballroom kind of thing there. Of course, when you're that tall, this is a pretty big room. Yeah. So anyway, and then as you look at, now this is out near where the 7-Eleven is. This is out in the country, in the boom area between Front Royal and Riverton. And you look up here and you say, my God, what is that, a castle? Yeah, there's an aerial shot of it. It's a pretty impressive building. Is it a fort? You know, what is it? It certainly was impressive sitting up on the hill there. And that was the original Randolph-Macon Academy, which burned in 1927. And believe it or not, they rebuilt that in a year to what it is today. They had a big fire there. And within a year's time, they built that. And so, that's just kind of the downtown area. I've got photographs of a lot of stuff, and I'm sorry, I kind of ran on, but I hadn't done this for a while, so. But at any rate, does anybody have any questions about